Sugar Apple Fairy Tale is an anime adaptation of a light novel written by Miri Mikawa. This series takes place in a fantasy world where fairies are hunted and forced to serve humans. The story is set in the kingdom of Highland, hundreds of years after the war against the fairies, where confections made from silver sugar apples are considered a sacred and rare commodity. This anime follows Anne Halford, a young sugar artisan that embarks on a journey to become a silver sugar master after the passing of her mother. In order to receive this prestigious title, Anne must win a confectionery competition held once a year in Lewiston. Since the road ahead is dangerous, she decides to purchase a warrior fairy to protect her along the way. Xiao Fin Xiao, a sharp-tongued fairy that hates humans, is reluctantly bought by Anne and forced to serve as her bodyguard. While Anne respects fairies and desires to be friends with him, Xiao just wants his freedom. This show was one of the best fantasy anime to make its debut during the winter season. Mikawa has crafted a solid story set in a very engrossing world with some really unique lore regarding the fairies. The characters that inhabit this rich, gorgeous looking world are well written and memorable. Anne is a naive girl that can be a little hot-headed and stubborn at times. She takes pride in her work as a sugar artisan and is very passionate about her craft. Her relationship with Xiao eventually changes as the series progresses and they soon begin to view each other as close friends. These two characters have some great scenes together. Some are comedic in nature while others have a rather romantic vibe to them. I love some of Xiao's earliest interactions with Anne, such as when he makes her feel uncomfortable and teases her, often referring to her as Scarecrow. Not only were the humorous moments between them enjoyable, but the more intimate scenes were good too. One moment that stuck out to me was a scene where Xiao tries to warm Anne up as they sat by the fire. Aside from these particular sequences, Xiao tends to be rude to humans as he generally looks down on them. Mithril Lidpod, a worker fairy that joins the pair on their journey to Lewiston, is just as arrogant as Xiao, but in a different way. Mithril is much more conceited as he thinks very highly of himself, but unlike Xiao, he doesn't speak as though humans are inferior to him. Jonas Anders, a young sugar artisan from the same village as Anne, has a bit of an inflated ego just like Mithril, but he lacks any of his enduring qualities. There's a scene in the premiere that occurs right before Anne leaves to buy a ferry where he tries to convince her not to go to Lewiston. Jonas tells Anne that he can make her happier than her mother ever could. Given that her mother just died a couple weeks prior, this was a pretty inconsiderate thing to say. Jonas is a selfish character who's only concerned with satisfying his own desires and boosting his own ego. When his supposed love for Anne turns into bitterness and disdain, Jonas becomes one of the few antagonists Anne has to deal with on her journey. Just as Anne wants to become a silver sugar master, Jonas aspires to be the next silver sugar viscount. Considering the gap in their skills and what happens with him, I wouldn't exactly refer to him as Anne's rival. At the very least, the character serves as a decent contrast to Anne. Whereas Jonas lacks perseverance, integrity, and can be cruel in certain instances, Anne is strong-willed, honest, hardworking, and is usually very kind to others. In general, the characters in the show aren't overly complex, but they function well within the story Mikawa wrote. The narrative moves along at a fairly consistent pace, with episode 9 mostly serving to set up the next part of the story, following a small time skip. Since I haven't read the source material, I don't know whether JC staff skipped over any important content. That said, I thought the jump forward made sense, given that Anne had yet to achieve her goal. Anyway, there are several dramatic scenes in the last few episodes that were very engaging. The conclusion to the first part of the story is satisfying, yet bittersweet, and has me curious as to what happens next for Anne and Xiao. The most compelling aspect of Sugar Apple Fairy Tale isn't its characters or the story, but the world Mikawa has created. The world that Anne and Xiao live in is quite harsh, despite how pretty it may look at times. Many humans force fairies into servitude by taking one of their wings, which basically functions as their heart. A fairy's wings can be used to demand obedience by squeezing it, thus causing the creature immense pain. The way fairies are depicted in the show is very unique and creative. Throughout the series, the lore regarding the fairies and the history of Highland is expanded on through little bits of exposition often woven organically into the dialogue of the characters. Many of these backstories and explanations are accompanied by some kind of visual and don't break up the flow of the episode. JC staff has done a wonderful job satisfied with this show's production. The animation is smooth and the artwork is excellent. I really like the art style and the character designs, in which the top of each character's head is a different color. The studio's use of color is masterful, often adjusting it to fit the tone and mood of certain scenes, especially during the latter part of the season. There are times when this anime can look very beautiful and vibrant. In other instances, the studio goes with a very muted and desaturated look, which perfectly reflects the atmosphere around Anne at certain points in the story. In addition to JC Staff's expert use of hues, the backgrounds they've produced are usually top-notch. I love the hand-drawn look of some of the environments, which seem like they were colored using paint, colored pencils, or possibly crayons. Aside from the visuals, the soundtrack by first-time composer Hinako Tsubakiyama is pretty good too. The weakest aspect of this series is without a doubt its action sequences. This show has several very short action scenes featuring Xiao killing beasts and fighting bandits. To be clear, these scenes aren't terrible by any means and work just fine considering the main draw of this anime isn't the fighting. The studio doesn't do anything special in terms of how they use the camera, shot composition, or switching perspectives. They could have gone all out with the presentation for these scenes, but they didn't really need to, especially considering how brief these sequences are. Overall, Sugar Apple Fairy Tale's first half was a very solid start to the series. This might be worth checking out if you're looking for something new from the genre to watch. If you've seen this anime, let me know what you thought about it in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching.